Hey everyone, Greg here. As you may know by now, I'm the co-founder and CEO of TripShock, an online reseller for water sports and tours. For the past 12 years, we've had the pleasure of working with hundreds of operators across the country, and we're looking to grow our community. It's free to sign up, and you only pay when we bring you confirmed bookings. We'll help you reach new customers, fill empty seats, and grow your business like so many have done with us over the years. Head over to partners.tripshock.com to learn more about our program, read testimonials, or speak directly with our supply team. As always, thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
They come to relax, enjoy the beach, have fun, and spend money. And that's where we come in. This is the Awkward Watersport Guys podcast. Find out tips on the best ways to market and operate a water sports business. If you're a water sports operator, you need to grow your brand, operate more safely, upgrade your operations, and of course, increase bookings. We're industry veterans, broadcasting from Destin, Florida. This is the Awkward Watersport Guys podcast. And this is Kevin O'Neill and Greg Fisher.
Damn it. All right, go ahead. No, do your thing.
No, you start the show off.
No, I'm not starting it. You do it every time. I don't know. Be like, hey, everyone. It's us, the Awkward Guys.
Episode 41.
Episode 41.
Do it.
You want me to do it?
Go and do it.
I'm on the spot, man. Hey, guys. It's your favorite guys, Greg and Kevin, and we're coming at you with episode 41 of the Awkward Water Sport Guys podcast. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Greg, and we're going to speak about budgeting. This is me like trying to not just be me. This is like you do the straight-laced, you play the straight man so well, and I play like the zany doctor, you know? So that's why I think you do a better intro.
Okay, well then how about the zany doctor does an intro? So, do it.
Yeah, it's fucking episode 41. We're going to talk about budgeting because Greg is going to drop some straight up like knowledge on us. And it's just going to be me asking questions because I'm terrible at budgeting. And I feel like most operators are probably like small mom and pop shop operators are terrible at budgeting. Like I talk to people and every time I'm just like, oh, what do you spend on this? What do you spend on that? What do you spend on that? I was like, I fucking hate it, man. I don't do it. I'm like recipe for success.
Well, before we get into it, there's a couple things, right?
Is there a couple things? What do we got going on? You got the new, you got like a printout in front of you, man.
Awkward, no, there's no printout in front of me.
We got awkward news?
We got some awkward news.
What's going on, man? Let's talk about it.
No, I think we got to share, which we just went down this week.
Where? Oh, in our town?
In our town, yeah.
Oh, you want to get like local awkward news?
Yeah, local. No, but I think this is just a good learning experience for anyone in water sports.
We bitched. Was it last week? Oh, no, it was the week before last.
Just a few days ago.
I'm pretty sure that's why it happened. I'm pretty sure somebody fucking heard our show and was like, oh, yeah? Fun Nazis, huh? Motherfucker, who you fucking with?
So basically what happened was I got a call from a citizen in Fort Walton Beach that said that there was on the city agenda for the council meeting was a moratorium on livery rental operators. And if you don't know what livery means, it's boat rental operators. And
boats and jet skis.
Boats and jet skis.
And if you don't know what a moratorium is, you're an idiot. Go to the dictionary and go to M, dummy.
So we literally, I panicked because I had 6 hours to create a presentation. And keep in mind that when they present an emergency moratorium, they only need one reading to push it through, and they don't have to do any public notice about it.
Nothing.
So I called Kevin. I called everybody that I could in the Fort Walton Beach area that rents boats, and said, "Hey, we got to get there, and we got to stop this." So, prayer presentation.
There's you. There's you speaking.
Kevin has a picture of me.
I took a picture of him while he was speaking, and he did not have his big guy voice on. I was waiting for the big Greg to step up, and then you were just powering through, and still got complimented.
I had to talk quickly because he got 5 minutes, but luckily, I'll say I think even if we weren't there, Kevin, I think it might have still been put down. But the fact of the matter of us being there was very helpful. it was funny because they said it was an emergency moratorium. They pitched it to council was, well, there's a lot of new businesses coming up and we don't know how to govern these new businesses, and we don't have any rules outlining what a livery operator should and shouldn't do. So I think they might have just been concerned about the growth and they didn't know how to manage it well. But just stopping growth and just shutting things down doesn't necessarily...
I don't believe that for an instant, man.
Yeah.
I don't believe that for a fucking instant. There's no way that was coincidental. Because these guys, our brothers to the east here in Destin, went out there and fucking made a fuss with code enforcement and fought with them. And then the very next day, there's an emergency moratorium. Like, how convenient, And then none of the city council members in Fort Walton Beach knew about it. Like, it was, everybody was like, what's the emergency? And then even the city staff member, the two things he said, what did he say? He said one was the amount of livery people applying for business tax receipts, which fucking weird. In the middle of June, a bunch of people are starting, they're getting 5 a week right now. That's weird. I mean, 10, 15 new operators, that's bizarre, but okay. So they're getting 5, 10 a week. And then he said there was accusations, and then he walked it back when one of our operators called him out and he said, well, what accusations? He was like, I never said accusations. And it was like so shifty. And it was just like, I felt like one city staff member reached out to another city staff member and was just like, hey man, put the smack down on these guys or something. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems
my biggest takeaway from all this is that as much as I think I know about my city and what's going on, I had no idea about this entire emergency moratorium. And I learned that at least in the state of Florida, and this is probably in other states, if they try to push through an emergency moratorium, they don't need public notice and they can do it quickly without even alerting any of the stakeholders. So that's one thing
But they didn't. They did it. They were total badasses in Fort Walton Beach. For as much as I bitch about Destin and the county of Okaloosa, man, Fort Walton Beach were like straight up some G's on the issue and like basically like had a lot of talking points that we talked on this show about 39. So it was finally like logic came through.
The council did a phenomenal job.
If anybody on this council listens to our show, I love. And
these are not pro water sport councilmen. These are not people who
they're pro business.
They're pro business, and
right.
They asked the right questions and they made the right decision. And there's no politics guiding whether they voted yes or no. They were just voting out of common sense that this was wrong, what was going on. So that was awesome. And if you keep in mind, that's why Kevin and I said before, be active in local government, check the agendas. We had no idea. We thought that things were great in Fort Walton Beach. And here it is, last minute. They were about to shut new businesses down and we couldn't believe it. So yeah, you got to be involved. You got to be involved civically in your community, because these are the things. If we didn't have the person that alerted me of this, if I didn't have that connection, then I would have never known, and I would never have told everybody that we would have been at this meeting without anybody pulling for us. So
yeah. So if anybody's been following our trials and tribulations with the city and county, and if you guys listened to 39 and heard the vitriol and anger, I gotta say it got wrapped back up knowing that the city was there for us. And afterward we sat down and we had some tacos. There was only a handful of us. It was like me, Greg, and then my nearest because it was crazy because this is what we were arguing for. Like I got up there and I said, like, it sounds like I'm arguing for my competitors or for new competitors, but I'm arguing for our industry. And so I think it speaks to, bizarrely enough, how galvanized our industry sometimes seems like it's not, because we're the only show that's like dedicated to water sports. There is no conferences, or there's one small, the WSIA, and that's mostly just for parasail. So we don't have like a, cohesive industry. And it was really cool to see some of the cohesion that me and Greg have been lobbying for the last year, for 2 years for myself, actually come to fruition. And we got a decisive win one time. And it was like, man, everything that we've been doing, for the last over a year has finally paid off. And it was great. So a little addendum to 2 weeks ago. It was, we won one for the good guys.
That's true.
Bad guys 40, good guys 1. we got a lot of mountains to still climb together, man, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So budgeting.
Budgeting, super sexy, guys. Yeah, I do. And if you're listening to this episode and you don't think you have something to learn from Greg Fisher here, this guy's got his own money. All right. When I say he's got his own money, he's got his own NFT. He's got his own token. This guy's got his own money. So if you guys really want to learn about your dollars and cents, you're going to listen to this show, because I'm about to drill down. Let me get to my questions. Oh, I didn't have any pre-prepared. So, I mean, like, okay, so Greg, if you're not Trip Shock, if you don't have 70 employees and you're sitting down and drafting your first business plan and you're getting ready to launch a company, when you have a blank piece of paper that says budget at the top, where do you start?
Well, the first thing you want to do is create something called a pro forma. And a pro forma is going to be basically projections of your income and expenses. This is an extremely important thing to do, because as a new business, you're going to need enough money to get you through at least 2 years. Your first year, you're always going to expect not to make any money. The second year, you should be breaking even. The third year, you should be well on your way to generating a healthy profit. So I think the first thing I do is create a pro forma, not just for 1 year, not just for 2 years, but a pro forma for 3 years. You know, Kevin, when you started your business in Fort Walton, did you do any type of projections or forecast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did, actually. Bizarrely enough. I know, like, I really could probably think of a huge dummy sometimes, but I'm not. I mean, I am, but yeah, no, we sat down and we put together even though we were self-funded and we had our own money, we did sit down and start thinking about expenses and writing down numbers, you know, money we would spend for marketing, cushion, to get us through. I don't think we had enough cushion, or that we had enough cushion. We weren't thinking about 2 years worth of cushion. We were just thinking about one year of cushion. Mm-hmm. I'm still really bad about that, insofar as sometimes I think, compared to my competitors, I keep too much. Like, I don't go too bananas. So I don't really know, like, what the industry standard would be for, but we haven't had a solid year where I could, like, go back and go, okay, last year's, you know, this year, and because we keep growing, it kind of makes it difficult to sort of project, you know, what my budget should be.
You always have to go back, and every year we do a budget. Even when I had my water sport company, I did a pro forma, and then we do a budget every year. These budgets can seem intimidating, but at the end of the day, just think of income expenses, you know, your rental revenue, your merchandise revenue, and then your expenses, which is your fuel, labor, just all the basic stuff. You can get into detail if you want a more robust budget, but don't think too hard about it. Just get the big ticket items on there. Like, you know, honestly, for Trip Shock, I'll tell you, there's 3 things that we really care about that make a huge difference. Our ad spend.
I knew it was going to be number 1.
Ad spend, labor, and credit card fees. Everything else, I don't even really care about, because those 3 things make up like 90-something% of our expenses. So I really, if I just had those 3 things on my budget, that's all I need.
For us, for a lot of operators, I think there's it's hard to get to an intangible, or I think that so is a really hard thing to put your thumb on. And then gas is so expensive, and then it's so random, or maybe not.
Well, wouldn't you say the fuel is a percentage of your rental projection? So if you project that you're going to do $100,000 in rental revenue, there's got to be a number to tie that as percentage of
this year would cost. Double from last year because of the ever changing cost of fuel. So I think that, but I don't disagree. If you have more data, if you've been in business longer, then you might be able to have a little bit of a better cost projection of like what your fuel costs would be. Last year, obviously, was the exception, not the rule, because gas prices dipped so far down, and then they came like back to what, I don't know what they were back in 2018.
In 2019, gas prices were almost the same as they are now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but again, so I guess if you take that percentage of revenue, I try and look at it as from my perspective, which is really hard, man. I've changed business models like 3 times, and then I've grown certain things. I've pulled certain things back. I've changed certain things. So, that's why I want to talk about budget with you, honestly. This is for me.
Kevin, it's completely okay to make changes to your business model.
Yeah.
To ask someone to create different pro formas every time you change your business model, if you're having to pivot, especially in the middle of the year, it's kind of hard to do. But I mean, if you're making a small change, let's say you're swapping out a tour, and it's going to have like a small impact, then I would say you can make some adjustments to your budget. I have it in an Excel spreadsheet. I just go in there and change the numbers. But typically, when you set a budget for the year, you really don't want to change it.
Yeah,
you want to stick to it because that's just how. And now, if you have to make a big pivot, like when your day of play got shut down, you had to make a huge pivot. So I would revisit that budget because there's going to be such a difference in your numbers. Now, you mentioned something about like fuel. There's some intangibles and some variable costs that make it really hard. Now, one thing that I do on TripShock, and I also did this with my Alabama Extreme Watersports when I owned it, I have, I don't know if you want to call it bad debt, but I do have a line item for CM mistakes. I have a line item for agent booking errors. I have a lot of these like weird line items that I basically predict that we're going to have $1,000 in booking errors. Like my agents are going to book somebody for the wrong date, and then we can have to pay the supplier. I have ones for like when my SEM guy messes up a campaign and we have to spend $1,000. Can
I jump in there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So, but how long did that take you before you realized that? Like, I mean, that probably wasn't year 1 or year 2.
No, that was like probably year 4 or 5 when I started actually putting it into the budget. And what's great about it is I might budget $5,000-$10,000 for agent mistakes. But if we're below that, then that's just great.
Right.
If we meet it or exceed it, then I'm like, okay, well, we got to look into that. But I try to budget for those issues that I know we're going to have. Like you might want to budget for, attrition with weather and equipment breaking down, things like that. Like maybe you put in your budget that I'm going to have to spend $20,000 or $1,000 a month in maintenance. Even though you might not use all of it, at least you can put that into your budget and know that is a real cost I might have to be paying out. If I don't have to pay it, then great.
So what are your thoughts on creating a budget like based on like certain percentages? So a question I get asked a lot is like, how much should we spend on marketing? And I think the SBA says something like that, like 10 to 20%. Most businesses spend 10 to 20%. So how can you sort of cost, like if you do have like high intangibles, and I mean, this all kind of feeds right back into pricing though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
well, you got to think,
because this is what should be driving our price.
The whole marketing conversation is all arbitrary.
Right.
Some businesses might need that run very like high margin or low margin businesses might have widely different marketing spend percent to total revenue as others. Also, like for a software company, for example, it's not so much about the revenue, it's about the user base and the social equity that they're building into their platform. It's all different. Now, if we're talking strictly water sports, then I would say, just talking with a lot of water sport operators, they're between 10 and 20% for marketing of their total sales. The ones that have been around longer, it's lower. The ones that haven't been around as long, it's higher. But also, it's going to depend on, now we're kind of getting into a marketing conversation, but that's okay because that's what we do.
That's what we do, doesn't it?
The ones that are, if you're going to be paying 20%, then I'm hoping that you are doing a really good job collecting, because it's okay to spend 20% if everything else is falling in line. You're making a healthy profit. So just because your accountant says, oh, you're spending 20% of your revenue on marketing, that's bad. Well, that's not the right questions the accountant should be asking. They should be saying, you're spending 20%. There must be a reason for you doing 20%. Maybe you're getting, you're getting more market share because you're doing this, or you're getting first party data, you're building a really large a known user database. Budgets kind of all wrap into exiting a business or selling a business. Kevin, if you were in business for 10 years and I went to go buy you and I said, hey, where's your customer list? And you said, oh, I don't have a customer list. I would walk the other way. But if you've been in business for 10 years and said that I have 500,000 users, meaning that I have emails, customer information. Now your business is worth significantly more because that's an asset. Like to me, that holds a lot of value. There's businesses that are bought strictly for their customer list. Budgeting, the marketing thing is all arbitrary, and it's okay to spend a lot on marketing, but what are you getting for that 20%? And are you still making a profit at the end of the day? Are you making the money that you are expecting?
Do you know what when you were running your water sports operation, do you know what your margins were? Do you remember what your margins were?
I don't, but I know my profit margin was around like 30%.
And I'm really bad. I don't have I don't budget. I'll just be completely honest with you. Like, I don't budget for the following year. I'm like, all right, we have cash in the bank. We're spending X. We got to fix Y. Gas has got to go on the boats. We got to have X amount of employees. Because we're just constantly, there's a constant change.
What's your mechanism for how do you know that you're not underwater, and how do you know you're
bank
in the
account,
green?
Bank account keep going up.
So it's just, you're just running strictly on cash flow.
At the moment, yeah, and then man, you'd be surprised. A lot of times my partner goes really deep in the weeds on this shit. And then he's always just like, man, he's like, every time you take a shot in the dark on something, you're usually right. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good at sort of ballparking some of these figures and sort of knowing where I'm at, just because I worked in it for so long. So I just kind of copied the model, the way I saw Sunset operating. And I was like, well, if he's making a profit and he's doing really well, and I just maybe do things like he does things, hopefully I'll be profitable too. And so far that's been the case. But this year, but now we're actually getting to a point of, I wouldn't call it diminishing returns. The boats and the skis, they're always going to do well. For the most part here, there's sort of a baseline for that here, so, I sort of I do a balancing act between keeping money in the bank and growing. So I just don't go we're going to go completely empty. I sort of do things in segments. So, if we're up $100,000, then I don't mind reinvesting $60,000, but I'm not going to reinvest let's say in March. I might reinvest in June, and then I might reinvest again.
Well, how do you know how much money you have really to invest? What are you just saying? Oh, I got this money in the bank, and I know that if I spend this much, I don't have expenses that have to be due. Do you have any mechanism to tell you how much is okay? How much is safe to invest? Not
from a mathematical data standpoint. I could probably reinvest more, but a lot of times I don't have to. Does that make sense? Where it's
I know exactly what you're saying.
It's such a small, it's 10% of what I have right now, or 15% or 20% of what I have. And I know if I'm operating right around the 30 to 35% profit margin, then I can reinvest 10 to 20% and still be safe. That I'm reinvesting our profit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So but Greg just made his face yeah, it makes sense, but that's not how I would do it. Yeah. That's not the best way to do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about equipment purchases, because one of the things that I did, and a lot of operators do this, at the end of the year, we always like to make business purchases. And there's a reason behind that. Obviously, we might have lots of profit. You can technically depreciate the entire amount of a ski or a boat if you want to, or you can do it over the course of, but Kevin, I think we've talked about this before. You depreciate all of your equipment, the whole thing every year.
Everybody does.
That's why you'll see a lot of orders right before the end of the year. We get a purchase order in, so we can, write that off. Mm-hmm. And especially if we need new equipment, it makes, it makes a lot of sense anyways. Let's not pay all this profit there, all these taxes to Uncle Sam.
So I do it a little differently. Sometimes I will do it. I do it at the end of the year to do that. Oh, it was awesome. And then I'll also do it in the mid, like I'm doing right now, which really sucks because I was not anticipating supply chain disruption. And if anybody, that's listening to this even has an inkling of what our industry is about. You know, nobody's got any boats or jet skis. So that kind of came back to bite me in the ass a little bit. So I go back and look at our numbers again, cash flow. I look at our cash flow from March, April, May, and I'm like, all right, well, did we crush it? Perfect. I'm going to reinvest and at least get those boats, those skis to pay for themselves through at the end of summer. Through summer, and maybe make a little bit of profit on them. And then at the end of, the fiscal year, if everything went according to plan, then I can take that profit and buy some more boats. So I'm constantly shifting that around. I wait till I have the money, and then sometimes I'll have the money and I'll take a loan on it because I love gambling with other people's money.
No,
so it's so much easier.
Yeah, that's actually something interesting to talk about. So this past year, a lot of people took money out from the SBA during the pandemic. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I took an SBA loan.
Me too.
I'm pretty sure every business took some degree of a loan.
Did you go for the second one?
The PPP money?
No, there's an additional.
No, I didn't go.
SBA.
Okay, no, I did two rounds of PPP. and then I did one SBA loan, but I didn't get a second SBA loan.
Yeah.
So the question is do you pay off that debt? And when you have a loan, when you make, so like right now, everyone's making a lot of money and they're going to have an opportunity to probably pay off these loans by the end of the summer. Do you pay off that loan or do you hold on to that cash?
Let it ride.
And I've had this exact conversation with another operator. And here's the thing, that SBA loan is like 3%.
I think it's even lower than that, isn't it? It was like 1% or something like that. It was really, really low.
I think it's in the twos or the threes. But regardless, if you have some big plans, if you're looking to buy a new boat or open up a second location, money's cheap. At 3%, you're better off taking that.
Well, you can't grow with that SBA money though. They're strictly forbidden by the SBA. You can use it for rent. It's almost as the same parameters as the PPP money.
All right. Well, you'll use it for rent and then use your profits for
exactly.
But the thing is, like,
I would segment that. So I did that. I created an entire bank account for that 150. And I put it in there. Oh shit! I mean, $150. I was like gave away my personal financial information. Regardless, I put that money in a separate bank account, and then I drew out of that money just labor, rent. So that could be. And
what I'm saying is just
right.
Before you pay that off, and I mean, you got to pay some interest, but before you go ahead and pay that off, make sure that there's nothing that any aspirations you have with your business, because this is an opportunity to find cheap money to grow, to do things. And there's no point of just paying it off and being done with it. And because you might, a year later, I'm like, man, I want to get a second boat or get a second location, and that ship will sail.
Yeah.
So
I agree. So back to what I was saying earlier, and I wish I got a little further into it, and I'm going to recommend it only being halfway through the book. It was like one of those things I started at the beginning of season or spring break, and then it just got away from me. So I didn't go all the way through it, but I kind of understood the crux of the lesson. It's a book called Profit First, and it is an accounting strategy and a budgeting strategy. And you basically create different bank accounts with different amounts of money in them for your different costs. And that I think in part it's supposed to play into two different things. It's one, it's psychologically, if you just see everything in one big bucket, then you're going to constantly draw from that bucket for whatever it is you need. But if you see a finite amount of resources, then you're going to be more sparing with how you draw from that bucket. You're going to think more about what you're taking out of that bucket, how you can optimize your purchases that you're taking from that bucket. And then you base the money that you're putting in those accounts on those budget projections that Greg talked about earlier. So I'm really bad about practicing what I preach, really bad about it. But yeah, so it's a book called Profit First, and I'm sure you could get like the what do you call it, the footnotes on it, or maybe watch like a YouTube video on it, and it goes into like an accounting principle. Mm-hmm. So I did that at least for that SBA money. That's where I got that idea from. I was like,
we probably, one thing I forgot, we probably have to take a step back with the budgeting. So we mentioned do a pro forma, but the thing is, like, how do you estimate a pro forma? Do you just take last year's numbers and add 10%? What are some places that you can get data to help you actually project what that revenue increase is going to be? Now, let's just say that you didn't add any new rental vessels to the fleet. You didn't add new sightseeing boats. You're just going to take the same fleet you have and then try to project the increase. You're going to have to ask yourself a few questions. One of them is, do you plan to do a price increase? Because if you do a price increase, that's going to increase your revenue. And the second thing is one thing I don't think people look into is like, where do the holidays fall? Because Easter can fall earlier or later and change your entire spring break. Same with Labor Day, Memorial Day when it comes to school schedules. So you want to look at the entire year and see, can any of these holidays, weeks change the potential for my business? And then next, you want to look at hurricane season. You want to look at, if you're in a coastal market, are they projecting a busy hurricane season? Or are they not? Because we know that
every year have they ever been like, guys, they were in the clear, it's going to be so chill. Every year they're like, more than active hurricane season. Never trust the weather channel.
And what the thing is, I try not to trust it, but at the same time, you have to factor in these things in your budget.
Facts.
If they say it's going to be low, then you kind of have to just go with it because they are experts, even though they could be completely wrong. And the last thing I would do is I would contact the CVB or your Tourist Development Council if you really want to like dig deep in your budget and see what they're projecting for occupancy, because the occupancy percentages are going to be very proportional to your revenue growth. And that, looking at just like TripShock, I mean, it's almost exactly the same as far as like occupancy growth and our sales growth. So if you can get like maybe someone to provide some information on what they're expecting for the year, or talk to a council member with the TDC, they might say, hey, yeah, we're expecting growth of 10% in bed tax revenue, or talk to a hotelier and see what they're budgeting, because they got some really smart people that are doing a lot of research, and sometimes you just can piggyback off that. Those are my main points. Is when you're creating a budget, how do you know how much revenue to project? And when it comes to expenses, obviously as more revenue, you're going to need more supplies, more labor. So you're going to have to figure out what that number is. And guys, it doesn't have to be perfect. And the best thing to do is look at actuals from the previous year, and then you can kind of figure something out. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least you can look at every month. You can try to you have some type of guide to stay within some numbers. If you go over, it's not the end of the world, and maybe it will teach you some things. Cause I look every month, I look at our budget. I look at where did we go way off, and I ask questions, and that really helps me with understanding where opportunities are and where we have to work harder on.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. It's a constant, like I take that deep breath, cause it's like it's a personal thing for me, but it just,
you have 3 months in the off season. If you spent one good week, you could put together a badass pro forma.
I know, but there's like, I want to go to Disney World and have fun and like not do budget stuff, man. That sounds so boring.
But you know what's cool though? When you exceed your budget and you crush it,
yeah,
it's such a good feeling.
Yeah,
so it really, and it makes you
bet.
Feel like you hold yourself accountable a little bit.
I'll tell you, man. Like I guess like so. Here's what happens. It's like October hits, and then I'm still trying to like keep stuff moving for October, and then November hits, and I'm like, I don't want to. If somebody was like, it's your destiny, I'm just like, shut up, don't say that word. Like, I don't want to hear like anything related to my company in November, because I'm so burned out. And then holidays come, and then it's January, and then I'm wrenching on equipment. But you're right, I got to sit down and I do like, it's not even necessarily like a budget. I just go through all of our costs. I just go through everything, like all the different costs, everything we went through, like which months were we profitable? Which month did we break even? And then just, I guess it's like I do budget, but I just I don't forecast, I guess is what I don't do. But because there's just so many things that, it's like maintenance. Maintenance is the biggest one. Like it's so hard to know like what you're gonna need for the following year, what these costs are gonna come in.
Well,
and then try and like
what you need to do is overestimate it. Overestimate your cost. Go on the high end, go conservative on the high end, and say I'm I'm going to spend a lot of money. And that way you can say, okay, my worst case scenario in this month, I'm going to make, this much in profit. But the cool thing is that if you come under it and that's just extra, it goes to the bottom line. And then you're not going to feel like shit that, man, I really did a bad job projecting this because I'm 10,000 over my maintenance. I mean, just kind of think about like, I always try to think of my budget, not necessarily worst case scenario, but I mean, this is like the worst thing. This could happen. Like, and there could be a lot of expenses, especially when it came to water sports, labor and churn and unexpected maintenance costs. I try to build that all in to the budget. So going from budget, there's another component that is not necessarily budgeting, but is right in that same idea. And that's your key performance indicators. And I know like a lot of tech companies, they use KPIs, key performance indicators, as a way to see, these are not necessarily budget items, but they're related to the budget in a lot of ways. So like, for example, a KPI could be your web traffic for the month. A KPI could be your conversion of your phone sales. A KPI could be your dropped calls. We have 100 KPIs at TripShock, and I'd say half of them can be easily applied to water sport operators. Our e-commerce conversion rate on our website, track that. And every month, my team goes into the spreadsheet and then they fill out each of the KPIs. And if they're below the expectation, because we have a goal, a target, then I chew them out. Or no, I'm just kidding. I don't chew them out. We talk about it and say, hey, why is our e-commerce conversion rate 2%? It's usually 2.5%. And then we have the conversation and we dig in. So, Kevin, I mean, for water sports, one of the KPIs I would do is like, how many maintenance incidents did you have? How many times did engine go down? And why it's important is, let's say you get the end of the year and then you go into next year and you say, oh man, in May I had 3 incidents and then last May I had 30. Well, maybe this new maintenance guy that you got or this couple of new crew members are doing something right. And then you can kind of dig in and say, why is it so much different this year? Or is it maybe the new equipment that I got? So the data that you get from these KPIs and be able to look back months or years, you can now really formulate your budget and you can formulate maybe what direction you want to go in with your business.
I promise you, I have been logging all of that. And that's really interesting. That's it's a really great way to look at it. And then because I have been, even before that we went on this run, I was telling you, or before we started the show, we just had a hell of a week with maintenance stuff. And 2 weeks or whatever it's been, but I've been logging everything that happened, which boat it was, which engine it was. Unfortunately, not everyone have hour meters on them, but that would probably be a pretty good idea too. Cause then you're right. You can look at it and then you can start to find patterns and things, because so it's a lot though, 2018 Mercury float switch, like VST tank went like, all right, now we know. But you're right, because once you look at all that, and if we grow and we got 30 boats or 40 boats or 50 boats, then we know if we have an engine that's got 400 hours on it and it's like, Mercury C Pro 60 horsepower and yeah, like these VST tank, the float switches that go, like 3 of them went bad, and we go, okay, man, well, at the end of this year, we're going to go through and change all the float switches on every single one we have. So, because we know that whatever that year, that particular engine, they seem to have a problem. There was like the 2019 had a low pressure fuel problem with a lot of boats. I saw a lot of companies going through it, and that was pretty easy to see. So we just started ordering those, but then what to have on stock, what to order, and then like you said, now you have this budget projection and you can put that into your budget and say, okay, like what's the best way of lowering our costs on these one particular product, because we know we're going to have to spend a little bit more.
Your KPIs help you with your budget. They help you with your forecast. So it's an necessary component. You don't got to get crazy. Like I have 100 KPIs. You don't got to get crazy. You can start with 5. You can start with 10. You can start with things that matter the most and stuff that you can actually track. And maybe it's like one of our KPIs is employee churn. So when we lose an employee, that's our KPI. We talk about like, I'm trying to think of another example that would.
You just made everybody feel real bad about themselves. I just want you to know, especially me. Like, maybe you got 100 KPIs. That's pretty cool, man. I don't know. Kevin poorly,
Hey, these are
implements
all...
KPI. Kevin poorly implements his own advice.
No, but the reason why I started implementing this, I was listening to another podcast, and there was a pilot on the podcast, and he was telling how he's a retired pilot. He started a business, and he was telling about how he has this system of checklist. Typically, when a pilot departs, takes off, he has 10 or 20 things he has to check. And if one of those things don't check off, then he has another 10 items to go. It's like a system of checklist. And that's kind of how I work our KPIs, is that when we don't, let's say our conversion rate is not what we expected. Well, there's another 5 or 10 things that we're going to check to see why that conversion rate is not hitting. Is it our ad copy? Is it something wrong with our website, the speed? So I go down this list until I find or figure out where the opportunity is to get this thing back up. So that should be the same thing with your business. If you're not getting enough web traffic, are your ads turned off? Is your SEO starting to fail? Is something wrong with your website? Those are things you need to know. And it's funny because I see so many operators, they get to the end of the season and they're like, I can't believe how many maintenance incidents we had, or I can't believe how many bad reviews that we just went through. And it's like, if every month, if you took just an hour or two to look at all these KPIs and compare them with previous months or previous years, you have a benchmark to see, how am I doing? Am I staying in that target? If I'm staying in that, like the targets that I set for ourselves, the milestones that we set for ourselves, because we have to hold ourselves accountable.
Man, we're gonna have to do like the next show. We're gonna do like part 2 to this, and it's like Greg's organization, because like everything you mentioned, I do, and I do track, but I'm not gonna say I don't. I do it willy nilly. Like I do it every single day, but I just don't have a system, and it takes, like, your systems and processes are everything, and you can, like, I am the perfect example of the like guy that has a problem letting things go, and I know any of you guys listening, you're that same guy. Almost every operator I know has really hard time delegating things. You got to keep your hands in it to some degree, but like literally every KPI you mentioned. So I sort of feel good about it, but I sort of feel bad about it, because one part of me, I do track everything. We recently we started a little place where everybody could go in and put all of their, every day, if there's a maintenance issue or they fix something, like, you have to log it. It's going to go in this place. If you want a day off, you need to request it in the same place where we all convene. And that can be a bunch of different, you can either have like a Google, you can have like a Google Drive, or a Google Sheets that you could use. I know companies use like Facebook groups. I kind of use all of that stuff. So I'm getting better about it, but it's like organizing all that shit, so, and this is just completely, anecdotal, and it is funny. Like with the review thing, I constantly track my reviews. I constantly track where our SEO is in our positions, but it's just sort of just like, it's all flying at me at once. I'm like, reviews. Oh, I got to make sure I'm doing that. Website. Oh, I got to make sure I'm doing that. Like that, I was down at the boat this morning, changing out a thermostat, making sure I'm doing that. Making sure all of our boats are running. Because at some point, in order for you to grow, though, you do have to take off a few of those hats and invest in a team, invest in software, invest in products that can automate these systems for you, because you'll be able to scale much quicker. And I know that intrinsically, but emotionally, it's hard for me to take, my hands off these joysticks, completely.
Yeah, and my situation is so much different because I have a pretty large team. But but the great thing about KPIs for me is that when I look at the KPIs at the end of the month and each department is hitting those benchmarks, hitting those goals, I don't have anything. I don't got to bug them. They're doing their job. I see that they're hitting the goals that we've met for them, and I'm good. Like I can move on to the next thing. And most of the time, every month, I look at all of the KPIs. I'd say 90% of the time, everything's looking good. I rarely have to even question anybody because they know this is what they have to do. And if you have a larger water sport company, let's say you have a maintenance department, let's say you have a reservations department, and you can create a handful of KPIs for each one. Well, every month, you don't have to go down to the dock. You can just see the KPIs. Are they hitting the review ratings? Are they hitting the sales, the monthly sales? Because you can you can take some of the budget items and put them into your as KPIs. I have quite a few of those actually. Are the reservations making a lot of mistakes? That could be one of them. How many are they putting reservations in wrong, not entering the names in right, and causing money to be lost? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can implement into your KPIs. And then, hey, if things look good, if they hit those targets, then you don't got to bug them. Then you're just gonna have like really productive conversation with them instead of dealing with like, hey, did you do this, and why are the sales horrible this month? They know what they have to do.
I think I asked you one time what the difference between the owner and a founder was, or an owner and a CEO, and I think it's these type of things, to be honest with you. Like as I would say a pretty rookie, entrepreneur. I've only been in business for 4 years. Maybe those of you guys listening are like shocked to hear that because I act like a big know-it-all. But I've been in the water sport industry for a really long time. But I've only owned my own business for 4 years, so I'm constantly struggling with these sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, the nuances and these sort of things like common. Things that all business owners do. It's like when you watch a show like Kitchen Nightmares, and thank God I don't ever see myself doing stupid shit that a lot of those people do. But, people that have this idea like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to start this business. And then they get into it, they fucking zero clue as to what they're doing. And sometimes I see myself making the mistakes, but I've read a lot. I've done the podcasting quite a bit. I've listened to a lot of tales and stories of entrepreneurs and CEOs and people and like how they've grown, how they've done this stuff. I think there needs to be like some more books for like how Joe's car wash completely failed because he was a dumbass who didn't, what I mean? Who had to be out there washing every single car himself. And it's one of those things where you can really get into trouble like growing too fast. And sometimes I feel that pressure too myself. It's like, man, I feel like we're just growing too fast. And I have seen some of my peers grow pretty fast and run into some pretty serious problems because they didn't have the infrastructure set up. They didn't have the KPIs, if you will. They had zero idea even what that even existed, yeah. So I don't know. You can edit that out. I want to. Terrible.
No, I think you're right. There's a big difference between an owner and a CEO. And the thing is, an owner is the type of person who's going to look at that monthly P&L or balance sheet and is going to say, okay, how are we doing? The CEO is going to be the one, looking at KPIs, coordinating with their teams, making sure that they got the resources they need, or if they're struggling, you're helping them and providing them, what they need to do their job and hit those numbers. So, I'm an owner, but really, like, it's
You're
all
motherfucking CEO, bro. Yeah,
it's
man.
all. I wear both hats. I'm looking at my P&Ls and my balance sheets all the time. In fact, one thing I do with so if you have an accountant that does your books every month, ask your accountant to provide commentary on all of your on your P&L. Take every line item and write something about it, like let's just say your revenue, and they can say, well, your revenue, was down, and I went to, looked at. I'm doing a really bad job explaining this, but go through every expense and every line item and have your accountant question it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And my accountant does that. She does a very good job. She goes through, looks at credit card fees. She's like, oh, credit card fees were 2.75% this month. They should be around 2%. But I think it's because of all the advanced bookings. And so she's right. So, and she's looking at our gross profit margin. Oh, the gross profit margin's up 1.5%. Maybe it's because of, travel insurance. But she's trying to articulate to me what she think is going on and why that is, and if it's good, even if it's good or bad. Like, we had an issue, a really bad issue with one of the advertising platforms we were paying. We were way overpaying for it. And the fact that she offered commentary, she was like, this seems unusual because typically we spend this much and it's high. And we noticed the error with our PayPal sales where they had the wrong rate loaded in for us. And she caught that too. So having your account look over, offer commentary, get some fresh eyes on some of the expenses to kind of engage in some conversation, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I finally got with an accountant. Like, he understood my business, and he's from like a larger firm, but he was like the rep that would handle my account. And then I think we just got finished with taxes, and then he just texted me and said, or emailed me and said that somebody else was taking over my account. So I was like, man, that's a bummer. Yeah. So, man, I don't think I have any more questions, buddy. I think we really got
we get there's some really good content.
I think we got some gold.
Yeah, I'm sharing some of our playbooks with everybody. And, at the end of the day, like, my business is not much different than the operator's business. I mean, we can learn a lot. Like, I'm taking things from larger corporations and trying to apply them to, a medium-sized business. And there's a lot of water sport companies that are way bigger than Trip Shock. So, if you have if you have an organization with a lot of moving parts, and you own, let's say, you have 4 or 5 locations, KPIs and having a good forecast you got to have it.
Yeah. Well, I know what I'll be doing this November. I'll be coming up with KPIs and working on spreadsheets.
Good. I'll share some with you.
Hey, I like that. I like that.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up. And hey, if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, get on it. Watersport and Tour Professionals, join. There's a lot of active, fun conversation in there.
Yeah, and keep your eye out for some more arrival news coming very soon, man. We're really excited about that. We got a big announcement on our pre-event, but we're just still getting the details together. All right, well, appreciate everyone listening, and as always, keep it awkward.
You've been listening to the Awkward Watersport Guys podcast. If you're in the water sport industry, this is the podcast that brings the business perspective to parasailing, jet and ski boat rentals, sailing, snorkeling, and everything else. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. Be sure to sign up to our email list at watersportpodcast.com and subscribe in your favorite podcast app. We'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.